Cześć, nazywam się Radek Orszewski i zapraszam Was na podcast Kanban przy kawie. Witam Was w 29. odcinku podcastu Kanban przy kawie. Będziemy dzisiaj, mówię w liczbie mnogiej, kontynuowali temat teorii ograniczeń, a więc temat, który pojawił się w poprzednim odcinku. Dzisiaj będzie, można powiedzieć, dla dobrego wzorca odcinek z wywiadem i z wywiadem zagranicznym, wywiadem z bardzo daleka, z antypodów, tak się chyba to nazywa, z drugiego końca świata. Ja musiałem wstać bardzo wcześnie rano, on musiał zostać dosyć późno w swojej strefie czasowej, żebyśmy mogli porozmawiać. Planowałem rozmowę krótszą, wyszło nam naprawdę długaśna rozmowa, właściwie troszkę nawet wykraczająca już poza obszar teorii ograniczeń, ale o tej teorii ograniczeń jest bardzo dużo ciekawego kontentu, między innymi tego, że no właśnie w poprzednim odcinku mówiłem o tym, że każdy system to wąskie gardło ma. Mogliście dojść do wniosku takiego, jak właśnie przy produkcji dóbr fizycznych w Goldratha dochodził, że to wąskie gardło należałoby się nim zaopiekować, należałoby mu podporządkować wszystko, ale dzisiaj będziemy podchodzić do tego z trochę innej perspektywy, trochę kontrowersyjnie, jak mówi sam autor tej koncepcji i mój gość. No właśnie, ale to zostawię Wam przyjemność wysłuchania tego długiego wywiadu, po nim będzie krótki mój komentarz, natomiast nie chciałbym przerywać naprawdę fajnego flow tej dyskusji, więc wszelkie ogłoszenia znajdą się teraz na samym początku. Będziecie musieli ich wysłuchać, bardzo mi przykro. Po pierwsze chciałem serdecznie podziękować nowym osobom, które dołączyły do grona patronów tego podcastu. Przypominam, na patronite.pl/Kanban możecie postawić mi wirtualną kawę, zgadamy się, coś tam dostaniecie, zresztą sami zajrzyjcie. Druga sprawa to to, że w momencie, kiedy ten odcinek się pojawi na profilu LinkedIn tego podcastu oraz na Twitterze, aktywna będzie ankieta. W tej ankiecie możecie wypowiedzieć się na temat tego, jakie zmiany chcielibyście zobaczyć w formule podcastu. Zaproponowałem tam kilka, między innymi krótsze odcinki, dzisiaj na pewno takiego nie będzie, towarzyszące materiały wideo, bo czasami czuję, że mi tego brakuje, albo może większą częstotliwość ukazywania się odcinków, ale chcę też powiedzieć, że jestem otwarty na wszelkiego rodzaju sugestie i pomysły i bardzo serdecznie dziękuję też tym, którzy już napisali, że case study, bardzo fajny, ciekawy pomysł od Grzegorza za pomocą Twittera, który napisał o tym, że chciałby usłyszeć może pewnego rodzaju słownik pewnych pojęć kanbanowych czy około kanbanowych. Bardzo ciekawy pomysł. No i na pewno, nie ukrywam, pojawia się tam już w odpowiedziach pewien zwycięzca, pewien faworyt wśród tych odpowiedzi, ale ankieta jeszcze parę dni będzie aktywna, natomiast jak nie będzie, to po prostu piszcie i dajcie znać. Tak jak wiecie, podcast można znaleźć na stronie kanbanprzykawie.pl, ale bez wątpienia najlepszymi kanałami są oczywiście media społecznościowe, a więc napisanie albo za pomocą LinkedIna, albo za pomocą Facebooka, albo za pomocą Twittera. Tam możecie znaleźć i mnie, czyli Radka Orszewskiego, i sam podcast. Co jeszcze? No, przychodzą oczywiście pytania o szkolenia. Szkolenia nadal na chwilę obecną są planowane głównie offline. Online. Offline pojawiają się takie zapytania głównie o szkolenia wewnętrzne, natomiast całą ich ofertę znajdziecie, przypominam, zawsze na leanagile.ninja. Tam mogę też zapowiedzieć w imieniu swoim i niezastąpionej Ani Radzikowskiej, będziemy w już chyba drugiej połowie, bo nie, czerwiec to jeszcze pierwszej i drugiej połowie tego roku oferowali po raz pierwszy w Polsce zupełnie nowe szkolenia. Będzie i Fit for Purpose, o którym mówiliśmy, będzie KDI, rzadkie, można powiedzieć, szkolenie na naszym gruncie, i w ogóle jeszcze nowe globalnie, a więc Kanban for Design and Innovation, oraz będzie druga edycja, druga szansa, żeby załapać się na ścieżkę Kanban Coaching Professional. Jeśli ktoś chce, to KMM, a więc Kanban Maturity Model. Mieliśmy 2 odcinki podcastu na ten temat, powinniście już to znać. Będzie więc druga edycja tego szkolenia oraz pod koniec roku w listopadzie KCP, która właśnie Kanban Coaching Practices domknie ścieżkę. Teraz zapraszam do rozmowy, do wywiadu, po nim krótki komentarz. Today I have a special guest from, well, I would say exactly the other end of the world. You may know the person, you may know the sound or even the picture, because he was also a guest at our European meetup some months ago. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello, everyone. I'm Clarke Ching, and I'm in New Zealand, where at the moment we are almost exactly the opposite time of the world. It's evening time for me here, and Radek, you're in. I think you just had breakfast.
Yes, yeah. So yeah. It's like right after 8 a.m. in here.
Very nice.
If I would ask you to introduce yourself professionally, if anyone looked at your LinkedIn profile, you are the bottleneck guy. How come? How did it happen?
Right.
What does it mean?
So the bottleneck guy, it doesn't mean I'm the guy that's the bottleneck. I'm the guy that helps you with bottlenecks. I have been doing theory of constraints since about 1997. I'm a computer scientist originally, and I just stumbled across The Goal, which is the Theory of Constraints, the original book that kind of brought it out into the world before it was even known as the Theory of Constraints. And I stumbled across that in 96 or 97. In 2003, I joined up my software development career with TOC when I discovered Mary Poppendik's Lean Software Development and David Anderson's early book, and I stumbled into Agile, the Agile swimming pool, and I've never really quite escaped the swimming pool yet. But the thing that makes me different is that I am a theory constraints expert, and I view Agile and Kanban and all of the different flavors as effectively being based on the same principles as the theory constraint. So I'm known as for writing 2 quite popular books. One's called Rolling Rocks Downhill, which is a business novel, and it's got I think the thing I'm most proud of that one is that it teaches Agile, not the framework stuff, or the recipe book kind of version of it, but the principles of it. From first principles inside a story that people actually really enjoy listening to. So my contribution to that is I guess extracting the principles, but actually making them palatable. So that's my first particularly popular book. My second book is The Bottleneck Rules, which is where my internet name, the bottleneck guy, kind of came from. It's a very short book. If you think of small batches, it's a small batch where it focuses on the key idea of the theory of constraints, which is bottlenecks. And I've taken Eli Goldratha's original way of describing it, and which was hidden inside a novel, and I've just simplified it. I've simplified it, I've modernized it, and I tried really hard to stand on the shoulders of Eli Goldratha as a giant, but take his work and just make it so much more easy for normal people to read, because quite a lot of his work is as much as I love it, it's a bit hard to get to. And more recently, my third popular book is Corkscrew Solutions. And for people who have read beyond just the goal and into more of Eli Goldratha's TOC stuff, there's a tool in there which is, I think it's his most magical tool, which is called the evaporating cloud, but it's kind of hidden in the book. It's hidden in his second book, which is a lot less popular, and it's only one of many really, really interesting and useful things. But I think it's kind of like it should be his greatest hit. So I've taken that and again done the same kind of effort. I've worked really hard to make it usable by ordinary people, because Eli presented it as being quite sort of mystical, and that kind of fits the all three of those books are theory of constraints books. The first one's about theory of constraints and agile. The second one is about don't read the goal if you want to understand the theory of constraints. Read this, and then hopefully you'll go and read the goal afterwards. And the third one is about bottlenecks of the mind, the things that block you, the really impossible problems. And so that's what I've done. I'm a bottleneck guy. I kind of put it out there, seems to have stuck, and I don't think I'll ever escape it.
No, it's really great. Thank you for the intro. You also covered, I would say, the most important deliverables, if you could say, the books that you just mentioned. And I need to say, totally honest, I just read your latest book and I said, wow, this is it. We all know that, the goal was probably one of the first business novels, right? So you explained some concepts, some principles for the storytelling. I think now lately storytelling is very successful, right? In business, you even have trainings of storytelling or something like this.
Yes, indeed.
A couple of decades later, I think you really nailed it to, I would say, distill the content and wrap it in a really, I would say, human-friendly language, right? Because we're going to talk about the focus against maybe the POOGI, right? And we know that even the wording for non-native English speaker like myself is much more, I would say friendly and humane.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do. It's just people don't have time to read big books anymore, especially if a book was written in the late 70s. Formulated in the late 70s, published in the early 80s, and it was set in a factory, and it was quite a bit more flowery, the language. So I just tried to write something that's really quick and easy to read, because really that the bottleneck for so many of us in our heads, the number one thing is the amount of information that we have to try and get to. So if we can prepare it and curate and put a lot of effort into making information easy to absorb, it just makes the world a better place. Because otherwise people just don't read big books.
True. Totally agree with it. Clarke, you mentioned Mary Poppendix Lean Software Development. You mentioned the early Blue Book, I guess, by David J. Anderson. This podcast is mostly about Kanban. And in a previous episode in Polish, I explained that for me, Teorii of Constraint is very much interconnected with Kanban, because from one hand, TOC is, I would say, a tool in a toolbox of any Kanban practitioner. On the other hand, some Kanban practices support, I would say, working with TOC, seeing some things. How do you look at it? How do you see these things interconnected?
Okay, so now it's going to sound a little bit controversial. So just give me a little bit of background here.
That's what our listeners are waiting for.
I know David Anderson really well. We've been friends for a very long time. I read his original book that he put out, and he's Scottish. I lived in Scotland, so. The lovely way of saying this is that David did a huge service for TOC because he took drum buffer rope, which is the manufacturing, the awkward name that Eli Goldratha gave to his manufacturing system, and he simplified it enormously, and he called it Kanban. And I think he did a huge service to the world by doing that. Rather than using the kind of the archaic and manufacturing language, he invented a new term, and which was had a Japanese name, which was brilliant. So it resonated with people because Japanese, it's got to be good. And he simplified it, and he expressed things in terms of limiting WIP, and it was just wonderful contribution to the world. So the controversial bit is that it is based on TOC. So David knows TOC very well, but what he did was the genius bit was he simplified it. So, but to simplify it, he kind of took the bottleneck stuff out of it. And limiting WIP. There's two things you do. Actually, there's three things you do really in any software development system. One is you prioritize stuff. The second one is you limit WIP, or as I put it, you deliver work in small batches, or sprints or increments or stories or whatever you want to call them, requests, anything you like. So prioritize, limit WIP. And the third bit that you do if you want to do it really, really, really well, is you make sure that your bottleneck is in the right place. And that's the bit that's missing from Kanban. And I know some people think they understand it, but if you read the goal and you've got a good Kanban understanding, I promise you, I'm not being rude to anyone that's done that. But it's the understanding you'll get from the goal is not what you need to do TOC and to be really, really, really productive. And I'll explain why in a minute. I'm not, if you do that, there's one place to have your bottleneck, and you want to make sure that it's actually in that place. And in most teams, it's not. You don't want a bottleneck that moves around. Okay, so the secret sauce is that if you've got a Kanban system, you've limited WIP, which is brilliant. You've got prioritization, which is brilliant. You presumably have got quality, good quality practices up, which is really, really brilliant. You probably, if you're doing shipping code, you've probably got very, very much more ability to have well-crafted, malleable code. So the last question in any flow system, then, once you've got all that in place, is where's your bottleneck? And in most teams, it's in the wrong place. So I'll describe where it should be, and most people will look at it, what I describe, and go, oh, we don't have that. So the place it should be is your developers. Now, a lot of people go, you mean we want a bottleneck? Yeah, you want a bottleneck, and you want it to be your developers. And people might say, we don't want a bottleneck. Well, it's not optional. You're going to have a bottleneck, whether you like it or not. And to make that the bottleneck, that means that the resources, the people, the machines, the rooms, all that kind of stuff that are upstream of the bottleneck, it has to have more capacity. And it means that the people downstream of the bottleneck have to have more capacity. And that's just the definition of a bottleneck. The bottleneck is the one with the lowest capacity. So now, if you look at this and you go, right, so that clearly that makes really good sense. I've got my developers working there. I want them to have got inputs from the people upstream of them, their customers, analysts, designers, UX people, etc., everyone that works upstream of them. I want them to have time to actually give them good quality inputs. I don't want them to go off and write a 300-page waterfall document. I want them to have time and to think. I don't want them to have to rush. I don't want them to have to feel like, oh my goodness, got all those developers sitting there. I have to give them something to keep them busy. I want them to have time and capacity to think through stuff and feed it into the developers, and the developers go, well, clearly this feels like it's really well thought out. Okay, so that's the first bit. If I sum up that, what it means is, upstream of the developers, the people who are feeding the developers stuff, you want them to have more capacity, to not be the bottleneck. Downstream, just if I really simplify it, you want testers to have fast feedback, to give fast feedback. It's really like fundamental to the way we work. You don't want developers to say, well, could you test this? And then the testers say, sorry, we're too busy. We'll get back to you. Should get back to you Wednesday. And then the developer starts doing more stuff, more WIP. And then when they get the stuff back, they discover there's problems in it that would have been far easier to fix a few days ago. So it's the same thing. In order to get fast feedback from the testers, assuming you have testers, then you need your testers to have spare capacity. You need them to have capacity so that they can respond quickly. So upstream, it's plenty of time to think and get stuff right. Downstream, it's fast feedback. And then you can widen that out even further if you like. But if you look at most teams, when they switch across to Kanban, Scrum, any agile kind of stuff, from another way of, an older way of working, they almost always end up with not enough testing capacity. And most of a lot of the practices we put in place are trying to figure out how to increase testing capacity so that they can give fast feedback. And that makes really good sense. That's what we're trying to do, because we actually don't want testers to be the bottleneck. Upstream, the kind of like the last mile, the hardest problem that most agile teams, and I include Kanban and agile as same thing, which I'm sure would outrage some people, but upstream. You want the people who are prioritizing. You could call them the customers. You could call them the product people. You could call them the solution people. You could call them whatever you like. But the people who are paying the bills and who are providing the details of the requirements and all that kind of stuff. They're the hardest person to get involved. Typically, and it's like the most difficult problem that most people have. So quite often you have the people who are upstream. They are part of your flow system. The internal customer is part of your flow system, and they are more often than not a bottleneck or the bottleneck. And what happens? It's insidious when they're the bottleneck, because what it means is that they look and they go, "Oh my goodness, I've got 15 developers and 4 testers there, and a bunch of analysts and a whole lot of people, and I'm supposed to feed that many people. I'm supposed to give them, feed them work to do. And I look at the stuff that's most valuable, and it's going to take a lot of my thinking time. So, oh my goodness, I don't have the time to do it properly. So I either run the risk of chucking stuff in just to keep the developers busy, which causes rework, and it does keep them busy. Or I look down the list. So the first one, that's rework. I chuck stuff in that's not really ready to be worked on, and that causes rework and huge waste of time and money. Or I look down the list and I go, oh, that's interesting. Number 19 on the list. It's on my top 20, so that's still important. That's really easy for me to prepare. And I know that that's going to keep the development team busy for weeks and weeks. So I'll chuck that to them, and that will buy me breathing space. Sometimes that's a good tactic, but if that's what's going on all the time, it's a really, 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 really unproductive way to work. But here's the kicker. It feels productive because everyone's really busy, but they're often working on low value stuff or rework, busy work or rework. The treatment for that, the thing that fixes that, is what I call the U-shaped team. And so if you imagine a diagram that has a U, the letter U in the middle of it, and on the x-axis it just goes, say, customer, analyst, developer, whatever. It just shows the process as it normally flows. And if you mapped out their relative capacity, the bottom of the U is the bottleneck point. It has the least amount of capacity, and that is your developers, and everything else, because it's U-shaped, it shows that they have more capacity. So I hope that kind of translates as a visual thing. But that's it. And the hardest job is figuring out how to move it there. So if you look at the goal or all of Eli's work, he had the 5 focusing steps, what he called POOGI, the process of ongoing improvement. That's not what you want to use when you're trying to deliberately make sure that the bottleneck is in one particular place. It's a different problem to solve. And it's a different process, but it uses the same ideas from it. Now I know there's a whole lot of stuff in there, but really, if you boil it down, if you're you're going to have a bottleneck, it should be the developers. And if they're not the developers, then you're going to be busy, but not nearly as productive as you think you are.
I already love this conversation because I learned a lot. I now realize, once you said it, the 5 focusing steps are pretty much like Goldratt called it, subordinating everything to where you have the bottleneck, while you focus on, let's make sure that we have the bottleneck in the right place.
Yes, that's exactly it. So can I give you just by analogy that might help people? Imagine that you are, and let's say you're the American Navy. I just do this because I have a picture of them that I use when I teach this to people. So you're the American Navy, and you've got a fleet that's crossing the Atlantic. And in the middle of the fleet, you have what is called the flagship, which is the ship that, the most important one. It's probably an aircraft carrier. And it's the one where all of the stuff goes on it. There's a whole lot of other ships that are around it, and they are there to protect the ship, and you've got ones that are looking out for submarines. You've got ones that are supplying, they've got fuel and all sorts of stuff. So there's a bunch of ships, but the job of most of the ships is to escort the most important one, the strategically important one, and they have to be faster than it. So could you imagine if you got this big aircraft carrier and just one of the ships couldn't sail as fast, but you've got to travel as a fleet. So you all slow down to the speed of the supply ship. you don't want that. You want them to all be faster, because you want to treat the aircraft carrier, the flagship, as a leverage point, and everything else goes faster than that. So just to contrast it, you don't want to pick your current bottleneck and just focus on making that as fast as you can and then waiting for it to move. You want to think strategically. And in software development, we can do that because it's soft. Everything that we do is soft, and it's actually far easier to change things. And a developer, if you've got too much time, they can help figure out how to do testing faster and move the bottleneck. So it's really good. It's just, sadly, it's a problem that people mistake being busy for being productive, and it's not. Sorry, I'm all excited here. I'm not talking too much.
No, and I guess our listeners will enjoy it because, like you said, well, if we even initially optimize the system for busyness, then we're going to generate a lot of what we call failure demand, right? So all the bug fixes, even reviewing and answering, it's not a bug, it's a feature, but it takes developers time, right, to do it.
Yeah, and the worst bit is that sometimes you will be working on low value stuff, but if you're looking at it from a technical point of view, you don't realize that your customer has fed it into your team to keep you busy. When you make that realization, then you go, oh, how do I get the customer to not be the bottleneck? It's actually really easy to figure out how to get the testers to not be the bottleneck, because that's what we're all got good at. But to get the customer to not be the bottleneck it's actually really, really easy, but it's not in the skill set of most people. So it actually becomes quite hard.
I'm sure some of our listeners will be inspired and start looking at the bottlenecks a little bit different. I would say that's, again, a very counterintuitive thing, because when you start talking about Kanban to people and start using also, I would say, controversial word or phrase, limiting work in progress. We don't like to be limited. So we feel like limiting is something bad. I can imagine many, I don't want to be like negative here, managers, hearing like, oh, we want to have a bottleneck. Like, no.
We call it then a leverage point or a control point. We use an analogy as like it's the value adding scarce resource. Because that doesn't mean that testers don't add value. It doesn't mean that customers don't. It means that we just focus on having a leverage point being the developers. And yes, they are the bottleneck, but sometimes the language, it's the most important point. And if you're going to add developer, so here's a little trick. If you want to slow down a team, just go in and add some more developers. Just go and add them in. So suddenly you don't have enough testing. I remember, or you don't have enough, the customer can't feed the new number of developers. I remember when I lived in Dublin years ago, there was an area of new houses that had been built, and they had built the houses up and they hadn't added enough school or retail capacity or transport. So they built this bit up and they created too much housing capacity, really, and there wasn't enough to support it.
Clarke, I don't think you were in Poland ever, and lately I would say, looking at like last 20 years of our urban areas evolution, it's sorry to say it, very, I would say, cancerogenic, right? So we have new areas, neighborhoods growing, and just like with my son driving today, I said, let's go earlier, because if we start 5 minutes earlier, we're going to save 15 minutes later standing in a traffic jam. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure lots of Polish listeners would know what you're referring to.
I'm sure they will. One day I'm going to come to Poland. I got invited there a few years ago by a friend. I never took the opportunity because their kids were too young. But I love your dumplings.
Oh, yeah.
And nice. I had a sorrel soup. I don't know if it's a common one, but
probably żurek or something like this, a kind of sauce.
It was good.
Yeah.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah, we have gems like this in our cuisine. So yes. That's true. Clarke, I admit, listening to your story about having the bottleneck in the wrong place, or I would say adding the people with the specialties to maybe not the right competence, right? It it recalls stories of teams, Scrum team, Kanban teams with what I call just a bad composition, right? So the bad ratio of people with one specialty against the other. It leads to many strange, sometimes funny, but in the end sad stories when I hear, oh, we are done with everything from front end in this sprint, so we started another sprint. And then I'm asking myself, so is it some kind of time travel? Like how come the testers are in sprint 13 while front end are in sprint 14? And as much as it may sound ridiculously funny, I find it difficult to convince business people to change it. I don't expect to give us the silver bullet free consulting here, but how challenging you find it?
I'll share anything you like. I'm happy to. If people try it and they get stuck, then I help them. If they don't need my help, it's ideas. So let me tell you I think the trickiest thing with all of these, it's like the last mile. They talk about this in train stations and commutes and like with broadband, that been about the last mile from the hub to get to the house is right. Costs the most, and it's the most difficult. But in Agile, Kanban, whatever you like, the last mile problem for us is getting our customers collaborating with us and working together with us and being part of our entire flow, but because it's because of history. We have years and years and years and years and years and years and years where the customer has always been them, and we've been separate from them. And when we worked in waterfall things, we got in difficult, horrible situations where rather than working together to figure out how to squeeze the most value out of our development capabilities, we were at war with each other, pointing fingers, and our business colleagues got really good at negotiating. But by analogy, have you ever seen the Godfather movies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you an analogy with that. So there was Tom Hagen, who was the consigliere, the advisor to the Godfather, and then suddenly there was this big war about to happen between the mafia families, and the Godfather said to him, Tom, you're a peacetime consigliere, a peacetime advisor. You need to step aside because we're going to war. And he got his son in, who was a fighter. We've kind of had the reverse thing happen to us. For years, we've been at war with our internal customers who think that the way that they get more value is negotiating with us. We've had IT who has learned to just suck it up and smile and say yes, and then be unreliable. And so they have learned wartime skills. They have learned how to negotiate, to play as if they're on two different sides of a soccer team, when really they're on the same side. So the hardest thing that we have to do is figure out how to bring those two sides together and focus on the same thing, which is that we deliver value to the company. And by doing that, we earn money. We get to pay the bills. We don't have to penny pinch. We buy good coffee and put it in machines. We can afford to pay our staff and maybe give them bonuses. And the secret to it is actually making nice software teams that actually work well together and are happy. So there's no conflict here between giving our business people what they want and what we want. But we have a whole lot of history. And like I know you can pick countries around the world or religions. It's very hard to forget and to learn how to cooperate. So that's a big part of what I do. It's based on all this logistical stuff, but underlying it, if I can just sum it up for you, we've learned to collaborate very well inside the software development teams, whether it be Kanban, Scrum, whatever flavor of agility that you like. We've got really good at collaborating inside the teams. But if we want to get really good at genuinely being agile and being a nice place to work, where teams work together and just love being productive together, solving problems together, then we have to go collaborative outside the team. Or actually, we just need to draw a slightly bigger circle so that when we say team, it involves our customers, and we get really good at talking to them. And that means that our IT people, us as techies, we need to learn some new skills. But it also means we actually have to start understanding what our businesses want. And a lot of agile stuff has become very, very inward looking. Not everyone. So I'm generalizing here,
sure.
but it's so common. But a lot of our teams are very inward looking. And when we started agile, it was all about the developers and the code. And I remember going to meetings, almost 20 years ago now. We were going agile. We've got everyone here. And you go, oh, where are the testers? Oh, we forgot to invite the testers. And now we've got that working much more collaboratively. We've got the analysts in the meeting, but we haven't broken down the problem, which is that our customers are partly at war with us. And they don't even know they are. They're just busy negotiating. There's a second bit to it, though, which is the bottleneck bit. They're actually the bottleneck. They don't have time. So rather than us selling to them all of the benefits that they'll get, which is what I've been describing to you, more money, more software, more features, it's brilliant, everything that you want. What we've got to do is not sell the benefits. We don't need to sell. We just got to make it easier for them. And that, if you think about it, in my bottleneck rules book, I have the formula for managing the bottleneck. So if your customer is the bottleneck, I'll read that out. I'll list it out for,
great.
for everyone. And actually, before I do that, for anyone that's got to this point and hasn't switched off, if they'd like a free copy of the bottleneck rules, it's share.toc.guide. If they go there, they can read about.
We're going to attach the links to the episode anyway, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So if people are interested to go there, we'll explain what the focusing is, and I'll just run it through really quickly. If your customer is the bottleneck, you've done the F. You've gone, it's find. And you might not think of them as a bottleneck, but trust me, if you don't have enough of their time or wish that they could devote more time to the team, or it feels like they may be cutting corners, they're the bottleneck. So you look at them and you go, okay, how do we optimize their time? Now, that's a little bit tricky, but the three that's the O. There's 3 C's in focus, and the first one is coordinate. So you just do silly little things that make it easier. And I've done this loads of times. It's just so easy. You just say, oh, you're having trouble getting to us. Would you mind? Hey, it would be good for you and good for us. Could we set up 3 half-hour meetings each week? Let's say they're at 10 o'clock and you just have office hours there, and it's just for our teams to get access to you. And that's 1.5 hours. That's quite likely doubling the amount of access time you have to them, but it sounds really easy. And they will say, they always say this. They say, how is it? So what do we do? Well, what do we do if no one turns up? And that's not a problem. If you've got a scrum master or someone there making sure that the team gets time with them because there's a little window that people turn up. But the actual answer you give them is, if no one turns up, why don't you just do some emails? They go, oh, okay. So that's a really simple coordination thing, which is the first C. The second one is collaborate. And this is something that's, I don't like using the word mindset because it sometimes gets used a bit icky, I think. But the coordinate thing is just so that the collaborators, hey, look, we're all working together. How can we help each other? And one of the hardest things that a product owner or a customer has to do is prioritize stuff. It's really hard to prioritize. It's really hard to go and answer all of those little details. But you've got people in the team who can help do that. Some of the developers, have been working on the system for ages and they know it so much better. So put them with an analyst and then take stuff to the customers where you've got recommendations. This is just really kind of basic stuff, but we don't have to sell to them. We just have to make it easier. And just the last little bit around it, the third C is to curate, which is to look at what you've got coming into the team and then go, okay, let's look at that very carefully and ruthlessly manage it for value. And often we don't do that. And curate's really important because it does help you move where the bottleneck is by picking and choosing what you work on. So really quickly, the U is for upgrade, which is buy more. The S is to start again strategically. And when I'm talking about the U-shaped team, you actually start with the S because you want to strategically make sure the bottleneck is you're moving it to the right place.
Like I said, I find the focus with 3C formula, it's more understandable, friendly, also in terms of wording, but also the definition that you, I would say, nail down behind every single letter. So we'll definitely recommend to all the listeners to check your book and start looking at it or with it at the process of like, how do we try to bring these people together?
Yes.
I also have like reflections on what you said initially about, us versus them, the white collars, blue collars, business, IT, right? We have these battles, unfortunately, despite agile movement is like, 30 or more years old, because, well, you could again refer to, I don't know, Takeuchi and Nonaka from 1986 art. So, that's a big thing still that we need to work on. And I guess what is important, like you said, we, the IT people, need to learn new skills. And I think in the Kanban community, we very often say that the sites are not equipped with the same skill of negotiating. So like we have business people, MBAs, masters in negotiations, and then we have engineers who, well, sometimes see themselves, sometimes are treated as just order takers, just do it.
Yes, absolutely. Order takers rather than value makers. And if you wanted to rephrase it, they are value makers. And they're so important because if you think of a business in terms of having a bottleneck, we'll forget about U-shaped teams and all that. So businesses, when they operate, they have bottlenecks inside their operational bits. But for so many businesses these days, software development is the bottleneck for their future, because that's where the improvements and the changes largely come from. And that's why this is so important as a commercial thing. But to bounce off your comments there about negotiating, we don't actually need to negotiate better, though it really helps if we've got people who can negotiate. Because if you're going up against people, and it feels like that, into negotiating, what you've got to do is disarm them and turn it into a collaboration. And that requires really just subtle but strong skills, and most of us don't have that. We're not born with it. You can learn it. I teach it to people, but it's really hard. It's a different type of collaboration to what you get inside the teams. But I think that's the last mile. That's the solution to the last mile problem, is just getting the teams to ask themselves, how can we collaborate better outside? And then that becomes a problem to solve.
Clarke, one final thing. I don't want to discourage them from getting your latest book, the Corkscrew Solution. I can only advertise it in a way that some weekends back, I was sitting on my couch in our living room and constantly every couple of pages, calling my wife, hey, listen to this, and reading some of the examples. Because I believe the algorithm, let's just say, or the way that you propose there and present there is like finding the best of both worlds, right? So I have solution A and I have solution B, and I know that I won't be happy with neither of them. So why don't I do something, totally different? If you would like to, advertise it or interest people, then...
Cool. Okay, so I don't give this one away for free. The title is Corkscrew Solutions. Okay, the subtitle is something along the lines of learn how the world's greatest leaders solve impossible problems, and that's what it is. And it's essentially a 4-step process, and it's so really, really easy. But if you look at bottlenecks, the thing is people can't see them, and then when they see them, they go, oh, there's a bottleneck. It's suddenly the world changes. With this book, it's when you get stuck and you can't make a decision because you've got two alternatives and they kind of compete with each other. And the book just teaches you this simple process. I like I said earlier, I got it from Eli Goldratha, from his books. He mystified it because he didn't know why it worked, I don't think. Well, at least his explanations for why it worked, they kind of feel a bit mystical and like guru-ish, but really it's just so easy when you look at the process in the book. I don't think there's anything in the book anyone can't do. But what I keep hearing people say to me is that I read it And I suddenly realized I had this dilemma. And that's the impossible problem. I have two choices. And I can't choose between them, because if I choose one, bad things happen and good things. If I choose the other one, bad things happen and good things. And then I just worked through it. And wow, I was amazed. And so I feel a little bit like, I don't want to kind of sell it because it sounds like it's impossible, but actually it really works. The example you saw, I won't repeat the thing to ruin the reading of the book, but the Winston Churchill example during World War I, it was just like, wow. And he was a great thinker, and he thought this way. I will give you another one that's not in the book. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the US president. This is kind of a funny one, but it's not funny. It's kind of weird. People described him as a corkscrew, having a corkscrew mind, which is the book's Corkscrew Solutions. But having a corkscrew mind is someone that thinks quirkily and just doesn't approach things the way everyone would. And that's kind of what this book is about. But when they described him as having a corkscrew mind, they said he was the sort of man that who thought that the fastest way between point A and point B was a corkscrew. In other words, it was all over the place. So here's his example. And this must have been really infuriating for the guy that involved. His speechwriter went to him one day and said, "You've got this big speech coming up, and I need to know, are you taking position A or position Z," which was its opposite, right? Two diametrically opposed positions, right? Roosevelt goes, I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. I'm not sure, this one or this one. Well, on the one hand, that one. That on the other hand, that one. I don't know. Tell you what, speechwriter, go and write two speeches, one which argues for position A and one which argues for position Z. So the poor speechwriter, I imagine, rolled his eyes and he went off and he wrote this, and then he wrote this, and he argued for these two completely opposite positions. Then he brought them back to Roosevelt and he gave him the speeches, and they sat down and he read them, and he go, "Oh, I like position A. That's very well written speech. I like that. It's very, very good. I suppose I should have a look at Z, though." He gets to the end of that and go, "Oh gosh, I like position Z as well. That's so well argued. I think I like that too. I tell you what," and he hands both speeches back to this poor speechwriter and says, and this is really the essence of getting the best of both worlds, which is the secret of that book. Just take these here and just combine them, and then write a third speech, will you, that gets me the best of both of these. So he delegated what's called integrative thinking, what I call corkscrew thinking, to the poor speechwriter. But I don't know what happened. I assume he went off and he came up with an even better position because he hadn't accepted that he would argue for one side, because both sides were good sides. And he wanted to just lift it up a little bit and figure out how we could get the best of both of them. So the book's called Corkscrew Solutions. I swear, if you read it, you add something like a virtual 20 IQ points, because you're able to solve problems that you couldn't before.
Yeah, Clarke, I think it's fair to say lots of our listeners are Scrum Master, Agile coaches, people who very often don't need to have a solution, but they need to teach the organizations and people around them the right tools. Sometimes I would say facilitate, right? I can imagine that what we are talking about here is a perfect to try to at least facilitate problem solving for those impossible problems at team retrospectives, and like, which way do we go technically, or which way do we go, I don't know, in terms of organization development, right? And stuff like that.
Yeah. And if they follow the simple recipe that's in the book, it's brilliant, because they don't have to come up with the solutions. They just get people to explain what they expect to get out of their side versus the other side, and then they kind of do what FDR did, and you get the best of both. But the conversation around it it's not people arguing, it's not heads butting against each other. If you can hear that sound effect there, it's people solving a problem in a nice, rational, clever way, and coming up with something that is not taking one position or the other, but it's getting the best out of both.
Yeah, because it's not about taking one side or the other, but just finding a working solution. That's what we very often forget, right? Because we feel attached to one of the options, and that's not easy to make a decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Clarke, thank you very much. I admit, I'll be honest, I planned a shorter conversation, but well, the heck with it. There's so much content from you, so much wisdom, so much actionable things for our listeners that I'm pretty sure there'll be very little post-editing needed for this recording in order to publish it. I'm already thinking about how to advertise it. So I'm going to try to attract people that, hey, there's a guy living in New Zealand talking about Polish dumplings. Maybe that's something what will attract some kind of some part of audience as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tyle rozmowy z dzisiejszym gościem, Clarkiem Chingiem. Tak jak powiedziałem, źródła czy linki do źródeł materiałów, o których on opowiadał, jego książek bezpłatnych, płatnych, znajdziecie w opisie tego odcinka podcastu. Naprawdę mogę powiedzieć, uwielbiam tego gościa. Po pierwsze, bardzo fajnie się z nim rozmawia, bardzo ludzkim, przyjaznym językiem. Tak, to też naprawdę trzeba docenić w tym gronie. On zawsze jest chętny poświęcić trochę czasu, żeby porozmawiać. I wydaje mi się, że naprawdę koncepcja tego, jak on tłumaczy, zwłaszcza ta koncepcja tego zespołu w kształcie litery U, gdzie powinniśmy mieć, można powiedzieć, nadmiarowe by się wydawało, ale oczywiście tak nie jest, zasoby, czas, skupienie ludzi, którzy przygotowują coś, oczywiście to wąskie gardło, ale to wąskie gardło w postaci deweloperów. No a niestety, tak jak sami słyszeliście i jak pewnie znacie, niestety z powiedziałbym autopsji często dorzuca się tych deweloperów do tych zespołów, które chcemy, żeby były szybsze i bardziej efektywne, ale wiemy, że nie, bo tam właśnie, gdzie oni są, to chcielibyśmy mieć to wąskie gardło, natomiast operować przede wszystkim upstreamem, hurra, a więc przed tym wąskim gardłem oraz można powiedzieć tym dołem strumienia, tak ażeby testerzy, odbierający tą pracę, product ownerzy, klienci, użytkownicy mogli dawać częsty feedback do małych partii pracy. Wydaje się, że żadna to nowość, powiedzmy, w świadku zwinnym, w świadku agile. No, ja bym powiedział znów, patrząc na kompozycję zespołów wewnętrznych, zewnętrznych, relacji z software house'ami, to niestety potrafi wyglądać zupełnie inaczej. Wyobrażamy sobie, że im więcej deweloperów, tym coś powstanie tego więcej, tym powstanie tego szybciej. No i wsadzamy się, można powiedzieć, niestety na taką minę, właśnie powiedziałbym łatwo identyfikowalną poprzez tą soczewkę teorii ograniczeń, ale też trzeba sobie powiedzieć to podejście fokus przez 3C, które Clarke opowiada, o którym opowiada w tym odcinku, które znajdziecie w jego bezpłatnej książce, jest naprawdę czymś bardzo, bardzo fajnym, dlatego że i takim ludzkim językiem, jak to mówiliśmy, i w taki sposób bardzo pragmatyczny pozwala tym zarządzić. Ja osobiście to kupuję rzeczywiście o wiele łatwiej niż koncepcję Goldratha. No i też naprawdę dla mnie taki eye-opener, koncepcja tego, że same 5 kroków, które sugeruje Goldrath, niekoniecznie muszą być tym podejściem, którego będziemy poszukiwać, żeby rozwiązać nasze problemy związane z wąskim gardłem w zespołach IT, w zespołach deweloperskich. Słuchajcie, co mogę powiedzieć? Na pewno warto zajrzeć do materiałów, na pewno zajrzeć do książki. Ja będę tutaj reklamował tą jego ostatnią książkę. Ona, wydaje mi się, kosztuje około 10 euro. Rzeczywiście ktoś może się rozczarować, że to jest taka książeczka, ale treści jest tam, powiedziałbym, takich rewolucyjnych, jeżeli chodzi o ten sposób myślenia i rozwiązywania problemów, naprawdę, naprawdę dużo, więc jakby tutaj ilość i jakość niekoniecznie muszą liniowo iść w górę. Tutaj naprawdę jakość i treść na małej objętości jest całkiem interesująca. Moi drodzy, tyle na dzisiaj. Bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Przypominam, jeśli ten podcast daje Wam wartość, jeśli dobrze się Wam go słuchało, jeśli macie pytania, uwagi, komentarze, coś było niezrozumiałe, to dajcie znać. Ja obiecuję odpisywać każdemu, nawet z kilkoma osobami gdzieś tam się zdzwaniamy, żeby porozmawiać o tym, co się dzieje. Ten feedback jest dla mnie szalenie cenny i pomocny, bo to jest podcast dla Was. Ja oczywiście mogę siedzieć i mówić sam do siebie, ale to poza tym, że mi daje frajdę, nie generowałoby wartości. Natomiast ta wartość ma być tworzona z myślą o Was. Następny odcinek pewnie około 3 tygodni od premiery tego. Do usłyszenia. Pozdrawiam, mówił Radek Orszewski.